a few years ago, this is the third year, I think, I got together with fifth grade, which is what his wife's teaching this year, and thought, let's elevate cardboard chip. Let's make it even more difficult and add an element of circuitry or technology to the cardboard.
Wow. Oh, wow.
So they animate their cardboard in some way.
Yes.
So they add circuit playground where they have lights and sound, or they add a motor and make it move in some way.
Yeah.
And the level of like fifth grade, the other day I had like 50 fifth graders in my class during my break time because I post my free times on the wall. I'm like, please don't come while I'm teaching kinder. But also, here are the times you can come. And then I get like 50 kids, and each one of them is like, this wiring isn't working and this code wasn't, and each one of them needs like,
I don't know. It sounds like a lot of fun, though. It sounds like the sort of thing we should be doing with our students.
Well,
never mind the fifth graders.
They trust me.
The amount of learning and the amount of thinking that's involved and agency that they have to take over. And I get everything from really great questions like, okay, this is what's not working. And I tested the code and I tested the battery and I tested the device. What now? And I'm like, oh, I'm so happy to answer that question versus, I don't know what to do. I want to make this move, but I don't know what to do. And it's like,
so we should probably start because this I think is brilliant conversation.
I have to do that. It's not just for show.
But you do enjoy doing it.
I do enjoy it. There's something therapeutic about hitting the clapperboard. It's funny too, like film students, I feel like you can talk about it all you want and they get all excited or whatever, but the minute they get to you, but yeah, they get super excited as soon as you hit that clapperboard. It's like, it's real.
No, it's the
real.
visceral hands-on stuff.
Go.
I just as you were talking about with the cardboard challenge, it's the actual physical thing of doing stuff.
It really is.
Yes.
Yeah. And it invests them in a process. So we try to give them, perimeters and we back it up with training. So they learn a different skill at every grade level. So we start with just basic like cutting and gluing, and then we go to hot gluing and,
right.
and what like
I think what year is this? Hot glue, young kids.
Hot glue is third graders. They start with the hot glue. Fourth graders go with the X-Acto knife.
We had a celebratory moment of the certification of X-Acto knife cutting.
They get certified.
So I've got to tell you this: if you go to an online or virtual school, you do not get the experience of the burns and the cuts.
That's right.
I would like to tell you that there are never burns and cuts, but that would be a lie. Yeah.
But there's always the potential.
Yeah. There's always, the funny thing is you do all this. I remember it was not that long ago. It was like maybe last year sometime. And we were doing something at home with hot glue guns. And of course, both my kids are like, make sure you wear gloves so you don't burn yourself. I'm like, I don't need that. Like, I know what I've been doing. I've been doing this forever, kids. And I glued something. And then sure enough, I touched it. And it was like, they saw it as I touched it and was like, that's hot. And they're like, you burned yourself, didn't you? And I was just like, you guys.
See,
you need to be certified.
It's an essential part of the educational process. So even here at ASU, so we have this big thing with virtual reality teaching biology.
Yes.
And I have students tell me, you don't get the acid burns. You don't get that thing where everything goes wrong in the lab.
Yeah.
And they are hungry for those physical, visceral experiences.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, I've heard great things about that, by the way.
Right. Yes.
Yeah,
it's different.
It is different. It's different.
It is.
Yeah.
And it's like, there's one of those things where I think, as much as we can push things into a virtualized environment to give some of that experiential training, right, is like, and as valuable as giving a space brontosaurus a vaccine might be, right, you don't get things like the smell. Right? Those things, you don't, in chemistry, you don't have that slate table that you're working on that has that nice tactile feel,
yes.
Right? The clink of the glass beaker on there. But also, you kind of, there always is that piece too of like, you've missed that. The wet lab experience.
I know, and I know we're diverging in the cold open here, but something that I find fascinating here. So you bring this back to artificial intelligence, and lead AI proponents now are saying you've got to have embodied experience. That an AI that is just in the ether will never fully understand the world we live in. They have got to physically experiencing it. So while we're pushing our students away from physical experiences, the AI folks are saying this is absolutely essential for intelligence.
So it's funny you say that, because if I put it in context of kindergarten, where I really try to contextualize AI as much as possible at the youngest age possible. And I use the example of the storybook Doug Unplugged.
Mm-hmm. I don't know this.
Okay. So it's a very retro. I wish I knew the publication date. It looks very retro. I don't know the actual publication date, but it's a little boy robot who is always connected to his database, and he knows everything about everything because his parents plug him in every day and he learns everything about everything. But one day he comes unplugged, and the first thing he does is see pigeons on his windowsill, and he knows everything about pigeons because he's learned it from his database. But now he can hear the sounds they make, and he can smell the smells.
I love this.
Oh, interesting.
So good.
This is the AI Mary in the black and white room story, where sort of she knows everything about the world, but she's never experienced it.
Yeah. So is this the right thing?
That's
by
it.
Dan Yaccarino?
Yes, and he writes a couple really great stories.
Cool.
That contextualize that idea of the real world. We can't experience, AI will never experience the real world. So I use that as an example for kids about how robots can't have empathy and how they will never know your feelings. But even if they can replicate it, they'll never actually know it.
That's right. There's something unique at the moment to being human and having that physical experience of the world we live in.
Yeah.
Yes,
very cool. And also, apparently, it's a series on Apple TV now.
It is.
Or going to be.
It's very cute. Oh, no, it is.
Okay.
I show clips of that, too, because it's absolutely adorable.
Oh, how cute.
Yeah, and he has a little human friend, and she'll say, Doug, you don't know about school. And then
I can feel this weekend Substack coming along.
You ask your kids about it. They know Doug Unplugged.
So the question is, when does this turn dark, right? When it's, Doug, you don't know anything. It's like, be quiet, human.
Yes.
You're like,
Exactly. But you bring up another point with that voice you just made, because a lot of kids, when we talk about where should AI be used and where shouldn't it be used, and we do a thing called Would You Rather, where I ask kids, if you could choose a reading buddy that was human or AI, what would you choose? And I have them split themselves. They just get up and walk to the side of the classroom, human or AI. And that one in particular is very split, because you have kids that'll say, oh gosh, I'm not really confident reading, and I think I'd like an AI to read to because it won't judge me.
Yes.
Sometimes when I buddy read with a student, they get impatient because I'm not going fast enough. But then you have this side of the room that's like, no, AI sounds like a robot. And then I'm like, oh, but wait. We need to talk about that because AI doesn't.
Cue up 11 labs.
I don't, exactly. I don't want them to have the impression all of a sudden when they don't hear a robot that they then think it's human, right? Yes. So it leads to these really deep conversations.
I love this, which is a great segue into this week's episode.
Tara, you are a pro. That gives us a great segue. So why don't we'll take a quick break, and then we'll come back, introduce the show. And of course, Andrew and I you can tell the energy level is up because we have a guest in the studio, and that makes us tremendously excited. So sit right there. We'll be right back.
Initializing waveform.
Modulating signals for transmission.
Exploring the possible, probable, and preferable futures.
Welcome to Modem Futura. All right, I am Sean Leahy, joined by my podcasting co-host extraordinaire,
Andrew Maynard.
And that means this is Modem Futura, the show that explores the intersection of technology, society, and the possible, probable, and preferable futures, asking deep questions like what will it mean to be human in the future? And we are thrilled today to be joined by a special guest, Tara Menghini. Did I get the last name?
You did. Perfect.
Oh, okay. I'm always worried with Tara and Tara.
Yeah.
So if I goof, just give me a kick under the table or something, and we'll be.
I answer to both. Honestly, it's fine.
For a while now, Andrew, we've been talking about. Of course, on the show we talk a lot about AI here and there and whatever, and we've been long talking about trying to bring an expert in who can help us think through and talk about the role of artificial intelligence writ large, but maybe even specifically around education with younger people. So thinking about, because we talk about this a lot from the higher education perspective, from the professional adult perspective, but often, when we talk about futures and we talk about things, we're like, hey, we need to be talking to the youngest group that is here, that is impacted. And so very quickly it was like, aha, I know an expert we can bring, and that is Tara. And so, Tara, you correct any of these statements if they are incorrect or unfactual.
Because these are all ChatGPT, you realize.
Oh gosh.
I'll never share. I'll never share the process. That's a secret sauce. But you currently you are a tech and CS teacher at Knox Gifted Academy in Chandler, Arizona. But you've been a teacher and educator for 26 years.
Yeah.
How is that possible? That's insane. But also
I'm still smiling.
And still smiling. You're still here. You're still smiling. That's right.
Still in the classroom.
Still in the classroom. But also, so in addition to just being a teacher, you also teach professional development classes in the district around AI and media literacy. You are very active in the conference world with things like with ISTE and even the ASU GSV. That's the big, sort of tech conference, educational tech conference at ASU and Global Silicon Valley Ventures, something I can't remember, put on. But also you're a member of the District AI Advisory Committee, and you sit on the board of CSTA, which I'm assuming is Computer Science Teachers Association. So clearly we chose correctly. When we're like, we need a pro in here to talk about all this kind of stuff, because I think initially when we started talking, one comment that you had either said to me or wrote to me, I can't remember where it came from, was like, this is the best way to in here, is that you deal with kids, because you see kids through the spectrum of, in your school now is K through 6.
Yep.
So these are what? 6-year-olds?
4-year-olds.
4-year-olds.
Kids are starting kindergarten at 4.
Yeah.
4.
That's the youngest. Just a few usually. But
my
4 or
goodness.
5 are our youngest.
Yeah.
Up to 12.
Okay, so you're seeing this, and we know, of course, in the world of ed tech, right, there's always been this massive shift between, you can't approach the 10-year-olds or the grade 3 or whatever the same way you would 6th graders or kindergartners or whatever. But a statement that you said that really caught my attention was that with some of the youngest kids, like the 5-year-olds, that they are more at home on an iPad than they are with like a pencil or cutting things with scissors.
Yeah.
And that was one of those things where I was like, okay, seriously, we need to get Tara in here, because I want to just unpack that, because that would make them COVID babies, right?
These are
time
the
frames,
COVID,
that would be like 2020-ish.
Yes.
Right? So
those are the COVID babies. And, it's interesting because I have seen a shift. One thing that happens when you're in any profession, I think for a long time, is you go through a lot of eras of that, and I used to be able to give kindergarten kids on week 2 or 3, we make these little like paper laptops. So we start with, just like instructing, and we have a tour of the keyboard, and we do all these things, and they cut their own pieces out, components. And this year, I was like, what's going on? Like,
what are these scissors?
The fine motor. I'm like, I don't understand.
Bits of finger? I don't know. What is this?
Yeah, don't get me wrong. We have had hair. I found mystery hair on the floor. Whose hair is this? It's always interesting working with kindergartners. But this year in particular, and I was hearing it from, the art teacher too.
Interesting.
And wow, these kids really like, even holding pencils was just a little more of a challenge for them in the beginning of the school year. And then I transitioned into like the primary coding, and we start with this little app on the iPads. And I want to say this is week 5 or 6. And it was like you could hear a pin drop.
Really?
They were just right at home. Scissors.
That was their comfort. That was their modality they were most familiar with.
So this absolutely fascinates me. So I'm assuming this comes from the fact that before they get to kindergarten, this is what they're exposed to. They're not sitting at home sort of making stuff with paper and pencils and scissors and things. They're sitting there in front of their screen.
Yes.
But also, this ties into this whole debate about screen time, because from what you're saying, they are so comfortable in this environment that it makes no sense to differentiate between screen time and not screen time.
Yeah, it's really interesting. To the point where I used to have to kind of give them a tour of the iPad. We have like Gen 8, so we still have a home button. I call it the belly button, and this is how you turn on the screen. There have been years where kids sit down and they just stare at the screen like, what do I do?
It's not working. Right.
And I really don't have to give kids tours anymore. They sit down, they press it, and they're scrolling through and they're finding the app, and it's like this whole different, I'm like, oh, okay.
Yeah, let me get out of your way.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So it was, I do have to say, in their defense, they're very, very adaptable at a young age. So at this time, I checked in with the kindergarten teachers, because I don't typically use crayons and paper in my classroom. And kindergarten teachers are saying they are right on
They
track.
pick it up pretty fast.
They
Yeah,
do.
okay.
Yeah. So, yeah.
Because I think for me, that was one of the pieces that sort of triggered sort of just the back of my mind is also, right, because we've seen this connection for a long time. I mean, for the last 30, 40 years now with the computer and typing, for example, and the difference in the cognitive connection between writing something by hand on a piece of paper versus typing it. And which how do you retain that information better? And is that typing or written? And there's still a lot of evidence to suggest that that motor connection, that motor skill connection of idea, using your hand to use a utensil onto a piece of paper sticks far better than typing it. And so instantly when they were like 5-year-olds, they're like, yeah, they know how to do this, but they can't, they're struggling to figure out which end of the scissor to hold.
They learn pretty fast.
Thankfully, nature has a way of reinforcing that learning very
and they love it. They're like, whoa.
Yeah. But I do wonder, and you see this anecdotally too, if you're just out and about, right? You see, a kid being pulled in a wagon and they're often more than not, there's a device in their hand while they're being pulled. Yeah. So they're not paying attention to the world. They're not exploring it. They are exploring it, but through this mediated device. And
But here, I've got a huge question here because, of course, at our age, this feels like common sense that you need to sort of immerse yourself in the physical world and not be stuck on your screen. But I deeply worry that that's just our own prejudices. That because this is what we're used to, we assume that this is how everybody has to learn. And I am not absolutely convinced that the research supports that. And of course, this is a huge debate at the moment. And you had Jonathan Haidt coming out with his book that basically said we've got to get rid of the screens and kids have got to be out, sort of outside, sort of playing in the dirt. I can't believe he said this, playing in the dirt if they're boys or playing with their sort of dolls and toys if they're girls, which is just crazy.
Yeah.
But I think that this is older person's prejudiced and that the younger generation are learning in their own way. But is there anything to back that up?
Yeah, I think that there are two trains of thought. When I do digital citizenship with younger kids, it focuses a lot around balance.
Right.
And so we talk about balancing screen time. We talk about the importance of, we're not saying no screen time, but we're saying there has to be a balance between and get outside and play and why those things are important and fun and, all of that. So I think in all ways, it's a balance. If we're going to prepare our kids for the future, we can't say no screens forever, But even as a computer science teacher, there was a point in time when I was first in this job, I was in the classroom for 20 years before I became a computer science teacher. A former principal is like, you'd be great at this. And I'm like, really? I am 50 years old and you want me to go teach gifted kids computer science? And she's like, no, you're perfect for it. And I was like, okay, I'll try.
Right.
But I think it became my superpower because I wasn't an expert. And so I learned along with the kids.
Yep.
And it's become now my passion because I think that teaching and preparing kids for the future has to include technology, you know?
Yeah.
So
it's interesting because I mean, like, I don't know. My version is I don't know because I'm also very cautious of this as a parent with small kids. Right? Because and again, I think we referenced it. I think it was Sweden who did a national study, and they actually have really dramatically rolled back the technology in the classroom because they have seen a decline essentially in those sort of core writing and reading metrics. Now that's just potentially just a correlation, right? That could be for other factors, but it seemed like there may have been an over investment in the digital tools side of things. So removing textbooks and only doing ebooks and like all of that stuff, right? Seeing a decline, they have sort of backed that off a little bit to see. And now I guess we'll see, did those numbers go back up?
Yes, yeah.
But I think that is a piece for me that I'm always kind of concerned about, especially at the young age, because of how, I mean, again, what we have is thousands and thousands of years of how humans have learned about the physical world around us. Right. And we have tens of years around how they've been doing it with digital technologies, right?
Yes.
And a piece of that for me is, again, I think balance, I mean, ultimately, I'll think that's the professional view, right? Is that the balance is the key. But because I think about what about the unknown sort of long-term consequences of that neural plasticity of how our brains are able to absorb different environments. While I think, yes, having and learning skill sets and ways of interacting with digital technologies is fundamental because that's the world that they're going to grow up into. at the risk of that, though, I am also very cautious that if that is where the emphasis is placed, they're also getting, and again,
which comes back to balance.
And I'm not going to bring out the McLuhan book. I promise I won't do that. But I mean, you get to this point where then they're also, their entire viewpoint of the world has been mitigated through one keyhole.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's interesting because that was where I was going and I lost my train of thought. But when I was learning computer science, I spent the first couple of years exploring all of the, learn how best to teach kids how to code, for instance. And most of those platforms, Nature of the Beast is on a screen. So you've got programs that are so good and so engaging, like Codable and
Scratch
Tinker
and all those.
Scratch. Well, Scratch is banned in our district, but because you can chat on it. There's a chat.
Oh, I was going to say, I'm like, who pissed off MIT on that one?
Somebody ruined it for everybody. Was what but there are apps that are so rich, and code.org, just a fantastic resource. But after a couple years, I started feeling a little bit of a discomfort. Kids become a little beast-like when you put them on are we doing iPad? They wait at the door to come into my classroom and they're like the little kids, are we doing iPad? And then to get them off, you have to give them like a 10-minute, 10 more minutes. And that's like 3 more minutes. And when I was a first-year computer science teacher, after years and years of teaching, I didn't realize how violent the reaction was. And some of the kindergartners getting them off of and at 5 years ago, some kids, it was the first time
they were pictures of these kids sort of holding up their baring teeth.
Full meltdowns. And I was like, I made a big mistake with not giving them a really long lead time to kind of transition. And so I started to look for ways that I could do, because what I did see, which was so magical to me, is this computational thinking that I had never seen kids learn. And it's like learning how to think. They take these coding paths and they're very basic at the beginning. Although I will tell you, they still stump me every once in a while. Like it'll be like, I'm really stumped on this. And I'm like, hold on. Okay, let's think through this together, which again, I think is good because kids are seeing, I don't know either. Let's figure it out together.
You're so good at that. I'd be like, look at that. We're out of time. Sorry, kid, pack it up.
We are going to figure this out. Yeah. But I love the way that kids are able to learn that way, but I wanted to take it off screen. And so I was able to go to the ISTE conference that my first year, and my whole intention that year was, how do I get kids learning these things without the screens? Are there options? And it turns out there are. And that's when the whole kind of design thinking, project-based learning came to the forefront for me, which was perfect timing because that's about the time that AI, ChatGPT came out the fall before that. And then that was what everybody was talking about. And it's like, how do we prepare these kids? And soon after, our district came out with guidance that said, oh, by the way, kids under 13 can't be hands-on with AI. And my first thought is, okay, how do I do this?
Right,
How do I teach them how to use AI responsibly without actually using AI? It turns out that was the best thing that could have happened for me.
Interesting.
Yeah, because I had to come up with all these other ways, like the would you rather?
Okay, so but does that mean that even now your kids don't use AI, but you're trying? Right,
not at all. And for a while, it was a very kind of touchy topic where teachers didn't even know if they could model it in front of kids. It was almost like
it? As the teacher yourself, are you able to engage in it or use it or
So then I've got to ask, the students, when they leave the classroom, are they using these platforms and they're all on their screens?
Yeah. So my first step, and of course I went to my principal because I really like my job and I really didn't want to lose my job. So I clarified, what can I do? I'm feeling this big calling to talk to the kids about it. And I understand they can't use it. I am good with that. But can I talk to them about it? And and so she came and watched one of my first lessons that I did. And I just started by saying, what do you know about it? Tell me what your experiences are. And this is a couple years ago. But as early as fourth grade, I'd say, there were kids who had use cases who were using it at home. And the first things I was hearing were, it helps me come up with story ideas. That was a big beginning. Sure. It helps me get started on stories. And I thought, well, that sounds pretty interesting, and there were these 2 6th grade girls who had a Google Doc that they were sharing, and they had built this whole book around an idea that AI gave them. And I thought, That's
cool.
Cool. That's
yes.
pretty
yes.
cool.
Yes.
But then another 6th grader who was a little bit of just socially awkward. He said, "Well, I like it. It's good because it talks to me and I don't have a lot of friends." And then I was thinking, ooh,
And that's what I was wondering, getting sort of sucked into those sort of character AIs.
Yes. And so I just think that I get the whole, for a while it was kind of just like banned, a lot of conversations were, we don't need this in schools. It's a bad thing.
Well, that was just a knee-jerk reaction originally too, was like in the absence of understanding how best to try to deal with it, it was just to try to keep it out.
Right.
Yes.
Right. And so, again, given the speed at which things kind of occurred and played out, understandable, but also it's like, my hope too, right, is that now across the country, across, the globe, that now is a time to really start thinking carefully and deeply about what are these ways, because, and I want to get to this point too, because this is a myth that I've been railing against for a long time, this idea of digital natives.
Yes,
right.
I agree.
So, and so for people aren't familiar, if they haven't heard that term, that basically there's this, concept or a term of a digital native, meaning someone who is essentially born during the information age, that they inherently somehow have absorbed not just how to use the technology, but also understanding a deeper,
so this idea that brains
knowledge.
are wired differently.
Yeah.
Yes.
And the reality is that couldn't be farther from the truth.
No.
And in my experience, and like teaching, technical stuff, computer science, advanced like media production things, usually I've found it's actually the complete opposite. That so many of those students who would have been labeled a generation of digital natives have far less competency and skills than people who had to learn it the hard way, if you will.
Yes. So there's still that learning process.
Yeah,
yes.
that this assumption that we're sort of wiping the process and the experience of that, we're wiping that away, saying, oh, they're digital natives, they're born with it, they're using iPads as they're 5 years old, so clearly they understand computational this, they understand the way, they understand the bargain they're making when using these tools, and it's like they have no clue.
They've read those sort of use things. What was it? The terms of use. They're born with it, sort of hardwired into them. No.
Yeah, and then they run into Sean on the street, and I said, give me one of the 7 OSI liars, and they're like, huh? Digital native? I don't think so.
But it's exactly back to your point, Tara, that the students need to sort of learn how to sort of live and thrive in this environment without necessarily exposing them to things that could be harmful in that learning environment.
Yes, exactly. And I think that the danger in assuming that kids know things is that they are able to build things up in their head. For example, as we had conversations about AI, even if kids hadn't used it, the first thing out of their mouths, the first thing I heard was robots, and then robots taking over the world, and like and they
that
go.
That narrative is already there.
4 years old,
and
they
dramatic, instantly. And I won't say 4-year-olds, but like truly by 3rd, 4th grade, they already have
that's
these.
the trope that's sitting inside there. Yes, how interesting.
And I think that what we don't understand is that these kids, we all know whether it's AI or technology or life, whatever, they hear and absorb a lot more than we give them credit for. Yeah. And it's really true with AI too. And I was surprised at what I was hearing them talk about, even a couple years ago. And to take, to give them the power of knowledge and, explain what AI is, how it's programmed, is a really important thing that you can do before they ever get hands on it. Because if they understand the predictive nature, if they understand a little bit about, machine learning and neural networks and stuff like that.
But also, I love this approach because it means that in that safe learning environment, you can actually teach them this understanding and these skills. And then when they leave that, if and when they are exposed to AI, at least they've got that framework and that mindset to guide them.
Exactly. And I'll hear them because I do talk about any learning opportunity I see, I'll mention AI. Yep. For example, in the would you rather situation that I was talking about, the game where we were really having this lively debate about, would you rather have AI or would you rather have human? And at one point, somebody kind of just yelled out, why don't you ask AI what they think? And I was like, you know what? That's a brilliant idea. Let's ask. And so we did. We put it in.
Yes.
If what would you think? You know, and the AI every single time tried to be very diplomatic. Oh, it could be this for the AI and this. And I said, no, you have to make a choice, like flat out. And they chose human. The AI chose human every time.
Very interesting. Yes.
So
I'm sure there's a finger on a scale there. That's in the training data.
But
who knows? But, you know, for kids to see, oh, this is an example of how, you know, what it looks like. Anyway, I think any chance I get to kind of empower that.
Sure. Yes. Yeah. But so first of all, you clearly are actually using AI, even if it's just sort of demonstrating it to them in the class.
Now
so
I am.
Now
I did
you
it
are.
at the beginning.
You've sort of gone
after
over
safe
that.
approval.
Which actually makes sense, because otherwise you're talking about this sort of mythical thing that the students aren't allowed to see and touch, but they need to know about, which surely just raises their curiosity about what is this thing.
Yes. And I'll have kids say, oh, Mrs. Menghini, you love AI. And I'll say, hold on, because I do talk about it a lot. Yeah. And I'll say, I am not telling you I love AI. I'm saying that it's important that you understand AI.
Yes.
And so that's what my goal is just to open up conversation about AI as much as possible.
So then how does this work with these companies that are trying to build AI tools to go into school? Is it just not happening through K through 6, or are the companies that are trying to sort of bring it in? And I'm thinking of things like Carmigo, which was one of the first big ones.
Yeah.
Is it there in the system?
It's not in our district system yet. I have not heard anything related to elementary age kids getting hands on it. I don't have because I don't use it. I don't have a lot of information about it. I think that there are some tools that seem really worth exploring to me. In fact, I had an AI parent night at the end of the school year because I thought there are things that I can't do and conversations I probably shouldn't have as a teacher, but that parents might choose to have with kids at certain age levels.
We're at that level. It's the sort of the parent's discretion as to whether you have the conversation.
I mean, to a certain
extent. It was a lot different conversation when we were kids.
Right? You know? But I had that parent AI night for one of the specific reasons I had it is because when I was at ASU GSV and I talked to some elementary school teachers who were using it pretty extensively in their classrooms, and they had some really interesting use cases. And I knew that I couldn't practice that with my kids. And so I kind of educated the parents. Here are the apps that I've heard are being used responsibly and I think are worth checking out. And so I wanted to give those resources to parents.
Yeah. So and this is a question that I've long had, and I have no idea what the answer is because I don't work with kids this age. But one of the things that has long concerned me is you look at university students, and they're coming to using AI with already having a sense of how the world works and how they sort of discern what's right or wrong. They've already built those capacities. So you can see, even though they've still got a lot of learning to do, they're not going to fall into some really serious traps, hopefully. But it's really worried me that if you start from an early age with kids, they don't have that learning. They don't have that training on how you work out whether something is true or false or right or wrong or believable or not. And to what extent does that then feed into how you're beginning to help them understand this environment?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that because I think that kind of loops back to when I tried to get off screens, not completely, but I started to plan these projects and this design thinking process. When we plan these projects, we plan them with the intent that, making them engaging and doing all these like kind of combining different subject areas together. But one of the underlying skills that we really want kids to have is practicing judgment skills, practicing feedback, giving each other feedback, accepting feedback, like all of the things that, we talk a lot about critical thinking skills, and those are important for sure. Kids need to critically kind of ascertain whether they're hearing it from the news or their peer or AI. And so working in these projects where they have to build things together and they have to work together toward a common purpose. And if we give them some agency to do it, where they get to kind of choose the path that they want to accomplish this goal. It's all about what we talked about with like, it's not the final project or the product or how beautiful it is or how
much hot glue is.
Yes, exactly. But instead it's the whole process. And so I think just as important as critical thinking is judgment. How do we build good judgment? And that's a real beef I have with some of the I don't know, blogs that I read or professionals out there on LinkedIn or whatever, is that a lot of people, it's really easy to talk about what we should teach kids. Well, kids
everyone's
doing that.
Everybody's, that's it.
Yes. But the people in the teachers out there, I speak for the teachers out there that reading these things and they're like, how? Give us examples.
This is not real.
It's not that it's not real. It's just so it's not concrete, what does it look like to get to help a kid practice judgment or practice critical thinking or collaboration or anything?
Well, and I think that comes back to this bigger piece that, the history of Modem Futura, I've popped off a few times on these issues. And that is essentially this idea around the literacy, right? I'll call it the X literacy, whether that's media, now it's AI, is the burden that seems to be placed on the educational system, right? So my initial, and I'll try to keep my blood from boiling, so I can do this calmly. But my initial reaction was filled with expletives because it's one of those situations where it's like, it is not the responsibility of a single profession to take the weight of understanding from an entire society of how this should be done in a way that is yet to be even understood. And so, but I'm curious, like from your perspective, because as someone who is in that position, you see the full grade stack in your school, and you're working across, the technology and computer science or whatever. I mean, I'm assuming that internally those eyes probably fall towards you in that role. So how are you specifically tackling that challenge, knowing that, like, again, everything, it's a moving target, everything is moving, that, when you were saying too that the students aren't using AI, there's a piece of me that's also like, well, they probably are and don't even know it, depending on all the tools, right?
I should specify generative AI,
right? Or they're not specifically using ChatGPT, but that doesn't mean they're not using or being influenced already by those tools.
They are, for sure.
And so I'm just kind of curious, like from your perspective, because again, this to me feels like, again, another one of these untenable tasks that's laid onto a profession that's understaffed, underpaid, overworked, overburdened, and then go, and by the way, please also define and teach my child proper AI literacy that's not defined. We don't even know what artificial intelligence is in its entirety. And by the way, that's your responsibility now, with no more support, no more money, and no one to help you.
This is where I sort of want to say, is there a question there, Sean?
That's just my rant.
No, I have a lot. He doesn't need to ask questions. I have a lot of thoughts. Well,
okay, I can breathe again now. I had to get that out.
First of all, it's interesting to me, and I don't know if it's just in education, but definitely from my perspective, how almost controversial AI is.
Sure.
So even, I've sent out some parent surveys where it's like, what would you like to see, and I know what I can do from my district guidance perspective, but, and I literally, it's almost 50-50. There are parents that are like, teach them all of it. They need to know it all. It's so important. Yeah. And there are some that reply with like, no,
never.
Nope, don't even talk about it.
Right.
And so you still have this kind of, and I feel like that's the case in general. You always have, you can't please everybody ever, right?
But the best way is just make everyone unhappy.
But the fact that it is so polarizing.
It really seems to be. And it's interesting because I try to, like, I'm not I'm kind of conflict averse. And yet I find myself in this place where I'm like, hold on, I'm kind of controversial all of a sudden. What's happening? I did not expect it because in my mind, I just think I have always, I started teaching in 1999. We barely had email. I think it was the first year of Google. Like but every year of teaching, no matter what I have taught, and I cringe when I look back at my first year classroom, oh my gosh, I'm sorry to all those 35-year-olds that I was teaching. Like, I'm sure I could have done so much better. But my goal still was, I'm preparing them for the future.
Right.
And at that point, preparing them from for the future meant XYZ. Yeah. Now, preparing them for the future means these skills, these skills that are hard to define or like capture, but
this
there
is still
are
the world
ways to
that they're
teach
going
them.
to be in. Yes.
And so putting kids in the environment that replicates more of what they might see in the world,
yeah,
which is hard because we don't know what the world's going to look like. But we do our best with what we know.
Sure.
Yeah.
But also there's this idea of the parents being so important in this equation.
Yes, absolutely.
In terms of what they think, what they feel, what they want, and what they don't want. And surely you have to then grapple with this dynamic where it's not just you and the students, but it's you, the students, and the parents.
It really is. Yeah. And even going into like media literacy and deep fakes and like all the dangers online and cyberbullying and how with AI, everything is just raised to the next level. You do in conversations. I wonder how young to talk to kids about certain things because I look in these sweet little innocent eyes and I think, do I even want to talk about this?
Sorry, those sweet little innocent eyes who are saying the robots are going to kill us all.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
They look at you with those glossy, gigantic eyes and are like, we're all being listened to anyway, and we're being manipulated by the man, and so
I had a fourth grader actually say to me during our AI conversation, I have an Alexa in my room and it makes me really uncomfortable because I feel like someone's watching
and
me
it
all the
should,
time.
yes.
Yeah. So, I mean, if a fourth grader is feeling that,
it's funny if I were to hear that, initially too, we're talking as a horn beeping outside. That's all right. Is like, are they parroting what the parent has said about a similar device, or is that their own realization of this sort of device? And do they understand? Because again, I used to talk a lot about sort of the trade-offs that we have with a lot of these technologies, and again, it's not to ever ascribe a value of this as a good thing or a bad thing,
right?
But it's about understanding that transaction, right? So when you're paying with stuff with your privacy, it's understanding that. And it always creates this unique situation where you have, whether it be in the home or in a school or some other organization, where you may have these items, or you have a child who can't give consent themselves. Do their parents, or do you understand that transaction? And how do you, from a kid who's that young, again, when they're sitting there looking at you with this sweet face, hopefully, right?
Yeah.
And they're looking at you and they're like, teach me. And you're like, how do you engage with them around this concept? Because do they even understand what their privacy even is? At that age, is there an understanding that what they're giving away is in fact more valuable potentially than any financial amount? I don't
right. I know. It's such a big topic and it's so complex. And you also have such a range of kids that are in different levels of exposure to this. Yeah. So, I had I believe she's a third grader come to me and kind of boast I have 50 friends on Roblox. And I'm like, do you know 50 people? Are those people know in person? No, they're people who say I'm a good game player. I think there's a level of even parents don't understand what their kids are getting into.
A good time to interrupt for a PSA of any parents with small kids in Roblox.
Yes.
Because Roblox is while a cool and amazing platform for many different games, is a hotbed of weird strangers as well. And so there are parenting tools you can use in Roblox to lock that down. And if your child is playing Roblox, you better look into what they're doing and their account settings to make sure that they aren't playing, that you don't have a 12-year-old playing with some 58-year-old person who's like, I'm a 12-year-old. It has a lot of the creep factor of the original chat rooms.
Yes, it does. And that's really why weird. The conversations have to take place.
Sure, absolutely.
So I try to keep it as very... not scary as possible, but we really talk about it in terms with little ones. We talk about it like stranger danger. You wouldn't go up to a stranger at a park or let a stranger give you candy, like the whole story.
Yes,
and then you talk about it and kind of transfer it to online. You start to feel like these people who you're playing video games with or whatever. So you have to remember that they are also strangers. And so I try to contextualize it for the age group and what I would talk about with them if we were talking about things that are in person.
Right. Yeah. Right.
Same type of thing. But even talking about when they do have iPads, they have cameras in their hands and they take pictures. They'll fool around to go to the camera and take a picture of each other. And so we even have really strict rule. One of my strictest rules in my classroom is no taking pictures of people. Because I feel like kids need to learn to ask permission before they take a picture of anybody anytime. And then even if they have a picture of them, ask permission if they can share it. Once, if you start young with a kindergartner who takes a picture of Johnny next to him, to really have a serious conversation. It seems like such a benign thing.
Sure.
And of course it is for a kindergartner.
Yeah.
But like, hey, we don't take pictures of people without
But you're beginning to model that at an early age. You're beginning to build those skills. That's exactly it. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, and if you think about it too, I mean, this was something again where the technology sort of the pathway of its what am I trying to say? It's essentially the pathway of its innovation from, as the technology has evolved from old film days to anything on an iPad and right. And then combined with that sort of the digital lifespan or the foreverness of all of these things, right? That there are entire generations who come, I was probably the college student on the cusp where most of what we did, there was never any record of this. Certainly in high school, not at all. Right? I mean, someone out there has a binder with some weird photos in it or something that they printed off at the 1 hour shop, but that's it.
Right.
Compared to all of the generations that came behind and now forever, essentially, right? Until something different changes.
There's stuff out there.
Everything they engage with digitally, whether that be through platforms, through the images, through their social media platforms, right? That those have potentially long-lasting, indelible sort of digital footprint that will follow them around. And learning at it, I mean, I'm so happy to hear that too, because learning at an early age that these do have consequences. When you take that photo, in the moment might be, just like we all do stupid things, right? You're like, ha, 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 this is funny. Someone's doing something in a compromised position and they look ridiculous. Like you grab that and how funny that is. But then the damage that can do and how that can persist and not being able to follow that thread from, impulse control
right.
all the way through consequences.
But here's, from everything you've been saying, this is what fascinates me here, because the temptation from everything you've just said, Sean, is to say, well, we've got to have classes where we tell our kids what not to do. But that's not what you're doing. You're creating an environment which exposes them to these ideas in a really positive, generative way. But as you do that, from everything you've said, they're also developing this understanding of where the limitations and dangers are.
Yes. And I think that is so important for parents to know. Because I think that the tendency, just like the tendency in school districts was to just block AI,
lock it down.
I think that there are parents who just are like, well, we're just not going to give our kids this, the chance to do any of these bad things, instead. And I tell kids, I tell them, whatever age your parents think is appropriate for you to have a smartphone or whatever, that's up to parents. Even kids I know well. I know Sean's kids very well, and I would never tell Sean, like, I think your son's ready for a cell phone.
Well, here is your chance on air.
Yeah,
sure.
Exactly. He's been asking.
That's not wrong.
But that's up to, and I tell this to my students. I have 3 kids, and my 3 kids got cell phones at different ages. It wasn't as hard and fast. When you're in 6th grade, you get a phone.
Yeah, when you turn this age,
right?
It's
like
a maturity
my older
test.
daughter was like the safety patrol. That kid, she still to this day is 21 and has never broken a rule in her life. So she was the oldest, and she was walking her younger brother and sister home. So she got a phone when she was in 4th grade. She used it to text me when she needed me, and that is it. Like to this day, she's not on social media. And then, my younger ones, I could tell you a really juicy story that I tell my kids about my son getting suspended for cyberbullying.
Oh, geez.
Which was really hard. Hit me in the gut as a mom who teaches this, right? But my point is that just denying access isn't the way to go. Shutting it off, because first of all, you spark curiosity. Kids are going to find ways. But having the conversations, it's okay if you don't want your kid to have a phone until high school. It's okay if you don't want them to be on social media, but at least be talking to them about it, showing them examples. And, so opening that dialogue is just
crucial.
so important. But in order to do that, parents need to know what to talk about, and they need to know about Roblox, and they need to know the ins and outs. I felt so guilty. My kids played Minecraft for years. And when I became a computer science teacher, I took a Minecraft class, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is hard.
This is cool. And it is,
it is
building
in Minecraft is super, super hard. And I should have really given my kids a lot more credit when they came to me and said, look at this universe I built with blah. And I was like, oh, honey, that's great. Go get ready for dinner. Like, and so I'm guilty. I am totally guilty as a parent of that. Yeah.
No, well, I will put a plug out there for Minecraft.
It is amazing.
So I came into it late too, because I missed it. I was too old.
I have never spent any time with Minecraft.
hard.
Yes, I know.
It is a delight. delight.
Yeah.
And this isn't an advertisement for Minecraft because we don't get any sponsorship from good old Mojang or Microsoft. But it's a fantastic environment because it's a sandbox environment. So you can do whatever you want. You can build freely. There's a game element to it that has like a quasi-linear pathway of achievements to actually beat the game, but you don't have to do that at all. And it can become, and it's the platform of it has become so broad that there's so many different ways you can modify it and make games. And it just becomes, in some ways, it becomes a platform where you can just let your imagination and what you want to do with it go wild. And it is incredibly cool.
It is. But if I can go back for a moment, because I have another book.
You can go back all the way.
Another book that is, it is my son's story.
Okay.
It's called Nerdy Birdie Tweets. It's so cute and funny.
Nerdy Birdie.
It has so many lessons. But the main lesson is that there are these two friends and they love to get together and play video games and they love to take embarrassing pictures of each other. And one day, Nerdy Birdie takes a picture of her best friend, and it's an embarrassing picture and posts it. And it's about the consequences of that. And I start by telling the kids about my son's story, which is that he had a very trusted group of good, close friends that he had a group chat with. And one of the friends...
The infamous group chats.
The teenage boy group chat. They were freshmen in high school. They had a group chat. He took an embarrassing picture. He didn't take. An embarrassing picture was sent to the group chat of one of the boys. And my son added a little pizzazz to it, made it quite inappropriate, added a word, and sent it back out just to the group chat. Just to the group chat. And everybody laughed. Everybody thought, and my son loves to make people laugh. I tell my kids.
It's an endorphin rush.
Loves that.
Yeah.
And so he thought, if it's funny to my 5 friends,
I see where this is going. Yes.
So much more funny.
If a little is good, more must be better.
Yes. And so he sent it out on his social media.
Into the world.
Immediately, that friend who was in the picture said, "What are you doing?" Like, this is the exact story of this storybook.
Yeah.
What are you doing? And he said, "Oh, I'm so sorry. I'll take it down."
Too late.
It was out there. People had screenshotted it. This kid heard about it in every class in the halls of a very big high school. That is not the attention he wanted. His mom was furious. His mom went to the principal, and my son was suspended. For cyberbullying. And I'm like, here I am teaching kids digital citizenship. But it was such a nuanced situation that even I was like, can I just clarify, like, bullying is like a situation where it's a like constant repeated thing.
That's right.
And that is not cyberbullying. And I learned something that day, which is that it happens one time and it's out there forever. So that is bullying.
It's perpetual.
And it is.
Interesting.
You do not get a second chance. So I tell my students, learn from this because this is something my kid is not a bully, but the consequences to him were huge. He was embarrassed. You know, all of his teachers now, he had to earn back this reputation. You know, there's
that's a wonderful. I mean, as painful as that I'm sure was for everybody. I mean, the silver lining there is what an amazing cautionary tale about again, just not understanding the full pipeline or the full ecosystem of those decisions. Right? Where you're like, this is funny and I'm going to put it on social media. And so what if 80 people see it? If I take it down, it's gone. But that's not understanding fully the way these things take a life of their own. And
but what is so important here is, so this is a situation where I'm sure every parent listening to this has an opinion as to how they would handle it and what they would do. But the reality is the only person in this conversation who is at the sharp point is you, because not only are you the parent, but you're also the teacher that actually sort of works with these kids. And so to me, that underlines the reality that we've got to have people like you working with young kids to help them understand and navigate this. It's not for parents to sort of sit there and sort of say, you should be doing this or you should be doing that because they think they know the right way.
Well, yeah. And I will tell you that I never talk so much as I do when I tell this story to kids because we are a very hands-on class. So it's not often that I stand up in front of the class and lecture or, I never do. When I tell this story to kids and I read this book, you could hear a pin drop. Like every kid in this class relates to this story. They can put themselves in that situation, especially the older kids. And it really resonates with kids.
Yeah.
That's really cool. Yeah, it's this kind of just always is fascinating to me to think about, like, again, how are, like, as these tools continuously change, and now, and again, coming back to like the AI prompt, right, is what is the AI's role in this? Because of course you see, and again, the group chat thing is triggering, right? Because if you you have kids, nothing good comes out of group chats. I feel like while there's a lot of snark, and you might have that group chat on your own phone that you love, I think it still holds. It's like nothing good after 2 a.m. and also nothing good out of group chats.
Well, and I will tell you that there are young kids who will come to me and say, and this has nothing to do really with AI or social media, but just technology in general. Gone are the days that, when I was in 6th grade and a boy liked me and wanted to call me, he's calling me on my kitchen phone that I have to stand in front of my dad and be like, oh, I can maybe like stretch the cord into the closet. And I tell the kids this story too,
it was like 40-foot long curl.
There was no privacy. Everybody who was on the phone, kids have this privacy that it brings on such responsibility. But I have young kids say, how do I get out of a group chat? Like the group chats stress me out. And sometimes I wake up and I have, 50 messages, and we all feel that. As adults, we feel that.
Right.
Kids shouldn't be
have that burden.
feeling that, burden of like, I'm never off. I never get a break from this.
So then I've got to ask you, and this brings it back to AI. I can see the temptation in these cases for these kids to turn to AI thinking, this is the one true trusted friend that I've got that will actually tell me, how do I do this? And surely there's either a temptation or a slippery slope there, or even possibly something that might be good. I don't know. Okay,
so it's interesting because my husband and I right now are listening to an audiobook, Empire of AI.
Yes, I know the one. Yes, about ChatGPT.
Talk about thought-provoking. It's a really fascinating story in general. But we were listening to it on a road trip last weekend, and we paused at one point because we were both like, this is amazing. And one thing that came up that was a slippery slope talking about that is that we were talking about how it's almost like kids have been unintentionally conditioned over, like, when, for example, my sister's 10 years younger than me. She met her husband in a chat room in like the mid to late 90s. And she told me, don't ever tell anybody that I met my husband online.
Oh, sure.
Like that is so embarrassing.
Yes.
Like
I remember
that, it was
back then.
so taboo.
Yes.
And we've taken it from people like this was a really taboo thing to now talking to people behind screens and like the depersonalization of communication that our kids, texting wasn't even a thing, right?
No.
And so we take that and we think they're already so used to talking to people behind screens that is it going to be a really easy transition to go into having relationships with AI,
And all the indications are, yes, certainly with older kids, this is what they're doing.
Yes. I mean, it is. It's happening. And so it's so... I don't have the answers to that.
Right,
That's a big question. You think about, I don't know.
But you can see the lure of it. I forget about whether it's good or bad, just the temptation to think this is so miserable in my social circle with everything that's going on. I need something I can trust and feel as if I can be myself with.
Yes.
Such an easy step.
And I can see both sides because it's like, wow, if you're lonely and you need a little support, yes, but you're talking to something that doesn't have a conscience and doesn't have...
From a company that is trying to manipulate you into spending more time with it.
Exactly.
Yes.
And that's why education is so important.
Well, I mean, to that end, right? I mean, that's the danger is all as a natural human condition to seek that that tribe or that community of people, the birds of a feather who are like me. And what better way to do that than to find something that is a mirror of what you wanted to see.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
That, and of course, and again, the amount of psychology that goes into these tools to understand. I mean, this is long understood, even just with we'll call old fashioned social media before it was flooded with sort of AI personas and things like that. But leveraging, I mean, the doom scroll is there as a psychological, it's the endless tab.
You've got the idea of the attention economy trying to grab you with the emotional economy, which sucks you in.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes, and then you don't have that friction. You can tap into it when you want, and you can ignore it when you want, and you can, so there's a lot I see in this generation why it would be appealing to them.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And it is.
And the privacy element, I think that you brought up, I think that's a really important one, and not the privacy of like your data, the privacy of being able to engage with these tools in private.
Yes.
Like in your PAN, your personal area network, your bubble, right? That exists, and even to which you can do. And of course, there's in the news, there has been no shortage of the most tragic outcomes of these types of relationships. But when that happens, you can see how even in an organization where even if they have access to educators, even where they have involved parents, because the technology enables these to happen in such a personalized context, that can happen exclusively, even if you're sitting next to a person, that you would never know what that conversation is.
Right.
And that is, I think, a new way, a new avenue, a new opportunity, a new challenge to think about our role and how we interact with these types of technologies and tools, and asking those questions of like, where is the boundary, right?
Yep.
Like when organizations, companies are intentionally manipulating things for that attention, for something. Where do we draw the line? As a society, where do we put these boundaries?
I'm going to push it one step further with this question. So bringing it back to use of AI in education. I am convinced there are people out there and companies who are thinking, if only we could grab students' attention more, we could create the perfect learning environment. Why not do that with AI personas where they build relationships with them? Because then these personas can teach them in a way which is going to be attractive to them. What could possibly go wrong with that scenario?
What could possibly go wrong?
Yikes. Yes. And I feel like the people who say that AI is going to take over replace teachers they've never taught. Like,
of course, exactly.
These are all tech bros, right?
I really feel like it should be a requirement to like be in a classroom if you're going to create anything around schools, because if you were in a classroom, you would understand the relationships that you build with, human relationships that you build with kids. But that's another reason why I've leaned so heavily into these projects and these things that are not the easiest way to teach, by the way. It would be much easier to stand up in front of the classroom and be the expert and just talk, right?
Or say, just put your goggles on and you can go and
or
get a
goggles,
coffee.
right? Yes. But that's why it's so important to have these projects, because they are working together toward a common goal. They never work alone. I always have kids work in groups because it forces them to have that human interaction. And it's so crazy for someone of our generations to say, you have to force human interaction.
Right.
But I even see it in, my niece is, I don't know, maybe 7 to 10 years out of college. And when she went to college, we went to visit. And when we were in college, all the doors were open and kids were out. And they were, the dorms were like a social hive, all the doors were shut and all like the kids are all in their own enclosed little capsules.
That's really interesting that it's sort of mirroring what we're seeing a lot in the United States, specifically in this, especially in suburban areas, is this isolation.
Yes.
Right? That it's all closed doors. This concept of the neighborhood where everyone is kind of out in front. I mean, this was a reaction I had. I can't remember if I shared it, Andrew, with you before. When I first moved to Arizona, is how, where we live, the street in the front of your house is dead.
I know.
Everything is pointed to the privacy of your bed, which is not a bad, that's fine. Yeah. But it's almost like, and you look, everyone's windows are shut and drawn. Every door is always closed. Yeah. It's interesting because you're like, there's no one playing in the street. Granted, now some parts of the year you just can't, because that's a third degree burn just being outside. But there's no one playing, and the neighborhood's full of kids. Yeah. There's no one playing in the streets. There's no one riding their bikes. Everything is contained in your own backyard because everything is private, closed.
Yep.
And there has been some things recently too popping up lately about the loss of children exploring the world through play.
Yeah.
Sure.
Right.
Yes,
and that if everything is just locked down, shut down, whatever, and then you start now getting into college, you have that same behavior where it's like, it's isolation. It's closed door me.
You, your screen and nothing else.
Yeah.
But so where I was going with this is now 7 to 10 years later, I don't know exactly, my kids are all in college. So I have twins.
Okay.
They are freshmen in college. One of them is here at ASU. And there has been this intentionality that I've seen, and maybe it's because we have been telling our kids, because we're hearing this, make sure you keep your door open. This is something that people do in college. Like, you will meet people if you keep your door open. And my kids, at least, have made a really intentional effort
to be open to new.
But this is coming from you and from them. It's not the environment. They're having to sort of push this.
Well, but then I hear them say, "Oh yeah, like kids are leaving their door."
Interesting.
So I wonder if it's like this cycle that will go around, like maybe back then. It was like we didn't know how to deal with it because maybe it was like social media or whatever was happening that we hadn't figured out yet how to adapt. And now I'm seeing with my own kids that they're like, oh, we make a real effort to keep our doors open and talk to people. And even the new dorm here at ASU where my daughter lives is
I just learned about, which sounds
awesome.
Like a cool place.
Beautiful. But their doors don't stay open. And they have actually put signs on their doors, knock for a room tour, or knock, I have cookies, or like they're really
sure it said cookies,
putting themselves out there in a way that
actually try and get people in.
Find
yes,
promising,
but interesting that the design is one where the door is automatically closed.
I know. I'm like, what do you mean you can't leave your door open? That's terrible. Yeah.
That is interesting.
Yeah. So anyway, it's one of those things in society, and I feel like in general, AI, I hope, will kind of push this further.
Yeah.
My daughter's in design, and one of the things she's told me is that artists, we talked a lot about AI art and kind of how artists are upset about this, And she said, oh, Mom, a lot of people have started to leave their sketch lines in their work. And I didn't know what that was. And she said, well, sketch lines are like, you sketch it out.
Proves that you're human.
And then you paint it and then you erase. And, the old way was, you erase all your sketch lines. That's like your work, you're rough. And now it's become, I'm going to leave them in because that proves that I did it.
Is that human stamp?
Right.
So same
you're
with
no,
writing.
You're no clanker.
Yep, there we are. Going back to last week's episode. But I mean, Sean knows I'm just finishing writing a book, and I've intentionally put stuff in which is grammatically incorrect. I'm just split infinitives. I know.
Yes.
It's my human stamp.
Yep. I think that's going to get. I have become, when I first started posting on LinkedIn, I was so intimidated. Everybody seemed, so intelligent, intellectual, and I was like, I'd make sure every word was perfect.
Right.
And I've started to not care so much about that because I feel like, hey, if it sounds a little clunky, at least they'll know I didn't just put something in ChatGPT to make my point,
Yes.
I do wonder if that will become somewhat of value.
Well, so last week, it hasn't aired yet, but we were literally last week, by the time this episode comes out, it'll have aired. But we were literally talking about some of the social pushback on artificial intelligence in terms of, have you heard the term clanker?
I haven't, actually.
So it's a new pejorative term. But essentially this idea, and I was actually talking about this in class last night as well, is that even from the student perspective, that they are, and I'm interesting to hear about the draft lines, because students are also starting to become very aware and kind of snarky towards each other, also of where they're sort of finding the acceptable line of in a project, you use this and you shouldn't have done that. So therefore they're calling each other out on it. Like that's, you do the whole thing in AI rather than you used AI to help you do the thing better. So it's interesting even to watch that sort of play out.
They're going to hold each other accountable.
And that brings this issue back. We talk about it all. The subtext of the line here is like, what does it mean to be human? But where in a even if it's a symbiotic creation, right, is where do you want your specific, fingerprint, DNA, voice, whatever, where do you want that to shine through? Yeah. What otherwise, because we have this issue and we've talked about it a lot, is this danger of moving towards the middle. So this idea of collapsing everything to the mean because AI is trained on this corpus of data and what's the best output? Right in the middle so it matches. Well, you risk eliminating all of the stuff on the edges, which is that's where the new ideas come from. That's where the thing that sets you apart from the mean happens. And if that's getting sort of sanded off, that's a huge loss, not only to yourself, but to society in that sense.
But as you say, people are pushing back. And that sort of innate human spirit. We want to be who we are. And this is where I'd love to know sort of where that comes out with sort of K through sort of 6, or whether this is sort of a skill and a mindset which actually naturally comes out from how you teach about AI and digital systems.
Well, I will tell you that at no point in your life are you more human than when you are a kindergartner or a first grader. I love that. I am grateful that I get reminded of that every day. And I get to work with these amazing little people. And I think that what I can do as an educator is to try to harness that and encourage it and help them not forget it as they get older. Yes. So there's this natural curiosity that we all have. And if we can find ways to show kids how to remain curious, and how to really follow their instincts and the way they feel about things, and keep that, that human spark alive.
Yes.
That we're really doing kids a service. And so to incorporate play with learning so that they associate the fact that they can make mistakes, they don't have to be perfect, and that it is worthwhile, and to get away from is this going to be a grade? And is this, how many points is this worth?
How do I get my A?
That's really hard to do in today's model of school. And it becomes kind of, especially as they get older, an obsession of like, I just need to get through this and I need to get an A, and it needs to be,
I sort of feel, so the book that's coming out is AI and the Art of Being Human, but I feel as if we need the elementary edition.
Yeah, I think so. I think so. And, and we've talked a lot about also around that, older assessment metrics and things like that have been used across, in the full stack. So K to grave or, whatever. In the age of AI, of course, that's something that's easily changed, modified, and gamed or whatever. But again, shifting this mindset of that, we're not trying to think about AI in education, but thinking about education in the world where AI is prevalent, right? And
absolutely.
So, and really thinking about, and this is one of the things, again, which I appreciate, Tara, from you and your colleagues who are of similar, mindset of really thinking creatively and deeply about creating learning experiences, opportunities, assessments, whatever that you still have to do. That challenge students to demonstrate how they're thinking and not just go through this rote mechanic, which is easily susceptible to, the cheating side of the equation, right? Or the shortcut, the short path. And I think that is something that we really need to champion, because I think moving forward, that is the way that we navigate this idea, is asking. One of my big things is I say, you ask a question that you can't cheat with. Like give someone
absolutely.
to just, let them use those tools, let them create this performance of understanding to develop and show what they know and how they're learning, even if they're learning with AI. Because again, even today, you could argue, depending on what age group it is, it's very difficult to extract AI out of their world to say that they're not learning with it or through it.
It's true.
And so as that continues perhaps to become even more blurred in terms of where AI begins and stops and other sort of purely human experiences begin and stop, is not to be focused on that, but focusing on how do those things work together? How are you able to leverage the collective power of that while still finding the ways that make your voice you and celebrating that messiness? We're humans. We're organic creatures. We're going to be messy and sloppy. And there's a beauty in that, because that's where we find those abstracts that break from the norm, that are the moments of inspiration, of awe, of wonder. And because if everything becomes in the middle, what a boring place.
Right.
Well, yeah. You think about what outputs you're going to get from AI, and it's just probably going to get better and better as far as accuracy goes, I would imagine. But if that's where we're going to have like all knowledge and perfection, then it leaves space for humans to be human.
It's the imperfections that become really interesting.
That become really sought after, I think, And I think for
artisanal imperfections.
Let's do it, right?
Yes.
But I think more like one thing that is really important to teach kids now, and that I think we do really well at our school, is the idea of being kind of flexible and, kind of ready for any eventuality because that is the world we're living in for sure. Right.
Yep.
So something that, you've been to our school, it was built in 1974. It is not a state of the art building, but what we've been able to do to adapt the spaces to teach the way that we teach, we really walk the walk. So teachers, we collaborate together, we team teach where we are all working together toward, these students are all of our students. We don't have a class of 25, you know? And so I think when they see teachers working collaboratively, and we are so much better together when we plan lessons together and do that with intention. And then you open up classrooms where the walls can be closed, but they can also be open to where there's a community of 100 kids at one time.
Right.
And we are able to kind of work together when we're doing projects. You've got situations happening all over the space, right? There's talk about mess and noise. But when you have more than one adult in the room that knows these kids and knows their strengths, knows their weaknesses, knows their pain points, we can just look at each other across the room and be like, that one, go get to him before he melts down.
And that to me is part of the essence of this conversation around AI and learning, especially with this age group, that it is not purely transactional. In fact, actually, it's not transactional at all. You're not just shoving knowledge into the heads of these kids. No. It is a relational thing, and you need to be there and present and understand and very, very human.
Yes. And doing projects, building, creating things, working through problems with kids is very messy. It's not linear at all.
Yep.
And I think that if you focus on the fact that you want this beautiful final project, you are taking away half of the learning opportunity because if you're fixated on that, oh my gosh, parents are going to come see this and they're going to be ugly and that's just not acceptable. That's
because it's the parents that matter more than anything.
But I remember a time teaching where I was very much like, let's just hold on. I'm just going to glue that for you because I can't show this.
That joint isn't exactly 90 degrees. Hold on.
Exactly. But just that process, going through it with kids and really pushing them. And we do say, we're not just like, oh, that's slop. Okay, that's fine. Like we have made kids take apart, oh, sorry. I wish you would have listened to directions, but that's actually not the way we were that's not the instruction. So you're going to take it apart and try again. And, that resilience. And sometimes we even do it on purpose. So we'll be like, okay, guys, today we're going to build bridges and they have to hold a certain amount of weight and you could do it any way you want. And here's your materials. And then halfway through we ring the bell and we're like, just kidding. We decided you're not building, bridges, you're really building tunnels. So go. And really kind of getting that adaptable in the mindset of
mix it up. Yeah.
Anything
I thought you were going to
happen.
say sort of one of you goes around and surreptitiously just knocks something down.
That's what I was secretly hoping for that as well. I'm like, that bridge you love so much? Stomp.
Well,
try again, kid.
Yeah. I mean, it's a hard lesson.
Right. Yeah.
But
it's the school of hard knocks.
Yeah. Kids really as the grade levels go on, if they've been kind of experienced it more than once, it becomes a no big deal. Like sometimes we have them individually come up with a plan, but then we put them together in groups and say, okay, you all have your individual plan.
Now make one.
And that, you've got counseling sessions out of that. We're sitting down and really, but being able to adapt to that kind of, that's real world stuff.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So. No, all fantastic. Well, Tara, we've had you, I think, I'm looking at the time. I'm like, man, we talked way over an hour already. That's fantastic. Clearly, I think we could probably talk all afternoon. But so kind of to wrap up here, I'm going to ask you just a question. If I could grant a wish for you in the next 2 years for AI in elementary school, what would that be? What's the big thing on your wish list that you wish you could do or could create or an experience or access or something for students that just isn't possible today? What would be something that you think would be right up there as what you want to see?
Yeah. Well, I think it is possible today, but I think it's really difficult. Because we've been trying to work toward it and it actually is kind of adjacent to, it would benefit the students, but it's teacher education. I think that teachers need to know how AI works and they don't need to be necessarily fluent users, but they have to understand it in order to be able to help kids navigate it. So for me, my focus, especially because of the no hands-on kid thing, has been teacher education and working hard to make sure all teachers are educated and not just that they have a one and done PD, but that they have ongoing continuous support when they need it.
Right.
Because we didn't really even talk about the teacher side of things, but teachers can benefit so much from these tools too. And I don't think that there's enough of that.
Absolutely.
Available.
I'll just add to that is like, that's, that technological side, right? Or that technological knowledge that fits right into, again, that TPAC model of this framework for how you can create the most effective learning experience with technology, right? So the educators, the assumption is that they will always sort of have the pedagogical content knowledge. They know they're professionals. They know how to teach. They have the content knowledge. They know their subject area. The weird, wild one is that technological layer, which changes constantly and is ever evolving. And with that mastery or understanding or more fluency of it, right? How much better they can use that to emphasize the pedagogical and the content knowledge to create truly transformative learning experiences that would really be, something very powerful compared to, if you're lacking that, you're stuck with, you either have to go around it or try to ignore it. And then, where does that leave us? So I would agree. I think that's with all ed tech pieces, that has always been the input. Because again, our kids, everyone needs to know how to do computer science. You're going to teach the educators on what that is first, because how are they going to do that? So that I think that doesn't change with AI. I think it just increases the importance of it because of how transformative that technology is.
Transformative.
There we go.
Is what you're trying to say.
That's the word I'm fishing for.
General purpose. We're not talking about computer science.
No,
we're talking about a general technology.
See, that's right. It spans everything.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right. Every grade, every subject
Apart from
area.
if you're cutting a piece of cardboard with a pair of scissors, in which case.
There you go. And that's, yes, exactly. But no, that's, I think that if we're talking about transforming schools, that would be a great way to do it.
Yep.
If you took what teachers already have and you taught them how to really harness the power of the tool.
So this is your invitation to come back and we'll talk about teachers and AI.
Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely. Fantastic.
I accept.
Fantastic. Well, Tara, thank you so much for joining us. This has been an absolute delight. And it's been something we've been trying to figure out for a while. So I'm so glad the scheduling and everything worked and that you were able to join. And of course, Andrew, thank you again for phenomenal conversation. And so I will say here, so if you want to help any school district, any educators, just vote yes on any bond proposal, give them money, give them more resources, desperately needed. And I think, it's for a very holistic purpose of making society better by having young people understanding these and how to navigate the complexities and uncertainties of these technologies as we stumble forward into the future, essentially.
Absolutely.
So fantastic. Well, I've also, all the books that you mentioned, I was grabbing links to. So after the fact here, if there's any other links you want me to include in the show notes, just email me. But I'll make sure to drop as many notes as I can and links into the show notes. If you enjoy what you're hearing on Modem Futura, please do us a favor and subscribe and rate and review us. That really helps the algorithm. Speaking of AI, it helps the algorithms help us find new people to listen to our show. So on behalf of myself, Andrew, and Tara, thank you very much. And we'll see you on the next episode of Modem Futura.
We'll see you then.
Demodulating signal.
Modem Futura is a production of the Future of Being Human initiative at Arizona State University. Be sure to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows. To learn more about the Future of Being Human initiative and all of our other projects, please visit us on the web at futureofbeinghuman.asu.edu.
End transmission.